Dragger, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Chapter 10. We're all friends here. The sty was cluttered and worn. A moldy atmosphere wafted through the chamber. The school teacher lowered himself into a large tub filled with tepid water. The little healer woman rested on a large bench with a bowl of food she couldn't identify. The sullen Dex climbed atop a snoozing, ghost-eyed Gore that had laid down more or less at random as it freely roamed the sty. The two slaves could have never guessed the Gore was called Runty. The beast had grown to monstrous proportions, and even to this day, Dex snuck him treats and snacks when no one was looking. The bathwater was soupy with flies and Gore bristles. "Hardly see the point of a bath in a place like this," said the slender slave, showing no reluctance to stand nude in front of the two females. Dex was lost in thought as she ran her hand over the damaged face of the hefty Gore. Aunt Ruby hates saw jaws. It's just something she does out of spite. For them and me, well, make the best of it, I suppose. I don't think I could have lasted another day in that swamp wagon. I've got such a bad case of swamp crotch. Anywhere is better than where we've been. The slave chuckled and took the plunge. Dex sat up on the Gore's back and looked askance at the newcomers. "Do you know where you are?" The old school teacher didn't seem concerned. At first glance, I'd say it was a pig farm, though now that you mention it, it's not like any I've ever seen. "You've never heard of Gnarlstead? Is it famous?" He glanced at the slave woman. "Do you hear that?" Dex was frustrated that she couldn't impress upon them the despair of their situation. She told them how even Captain Sano was never coming back, and how Rux had vanished in the night. She told the new slaves about the other Callows who had come and gone, desperate to get her point across. She told them how barely a month ago, Swango had climbed to the top of Gnarlstead Manor and thrown herself off the roof, and how the soft ground hadn't killed her, and Father forbade any to help her, or even put her out of her misery. How they had been forced to leave her groaning in the mud for 2 days before she finally escaped. And Ixulingo hasn't said a word since her other half died. Or maybe it was the other way around, added Dex. I doubt even Father can tell them apart. Could have told them apart. The sty was quiet for a moment, until finally Dex's frustrations got the better of her, and she slammed her fist down on Runty's hump. The Gore didn't notice at all. "It just isn't fair. Vago is right. I'm never getting out of this sty. Don't you understand? We're all trapped here? Is there anything I might do to help?" said the bathing slave. Dex glanced at the battered, aging man. A bit of her anger drained away, and she laughed at the idea. "No, I don't think so." "That's a relief," he said flatly. "Saves me the trouble. I'm only a slave after all. I don't know anything about this side of the Arvinder. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure which side I'm on." Dex pointed at the rear wall, where you could see swamp vines growing in the rafters. "That's the Hurin. The Arvinder is the other way. Not that it matters. There's only one way out of Gnarlstead." "I see, miss." "Pfft," she huffed. "That's twice someone called me Ms. today. Call me Dex." "I see." Dex was mystified by this man's odd behavior. It almost seemed like he wanted to be here. "My name is Rowan," said the slave, "and that is my good friend, Dr. Arlu." "Hello," waved Dex from the Gore's back. Arlu shrugged in response. Dex clambered down to greet her, using the curve of the Gore tusk like a stepping stool. "I'm afraid she can't talk," said Rowan. "When she was a child, brigands cut out her tongue. I tell you, this world of ours." Dex used the inside of her sleeve to wipe several dirt splotches off of Arlu's face. Rowan climbed out of the tub and began drying his bronze body with a little more discretion now that they'd been introduced. "You got a lot of scars. It looks like you two have been through a lot. With all we've been through, sometimes I'm amazed we're still alive. Since the war flared up again. Dex jerked back, remembering her talk with Lo about being on the wrong side. What do you know about that? That's how we ended up here. Were you defeated in battle? Oh yes, more times than I care to count, though I'm not sure what counts. Rowan exchanged glances with Arlu and seemed to Dex to evade the subject. I'm a slave, not a historian. Arlu says I'm too factual, that I lack artistic flourish. As Rowan adjusted his tunic, Dex saw a scar on his arm. She reached impulsively to touch it with her finger. Well, teacher, you've got an ugly old wound there. You're very observant, sighed Rowan, though I'm nonplussed by your descriptors. It was just a little arrow. My comrade fared much worse. Arlu snapped her fingers at him. Rowan laughed. But that's ugly and old, as you say. Dex's golden eyes stared at his face, or, more accurately, through his face. Your friend was shot in the leg? She said in a tone somewhere between fact and question. Rowan looked at Dex, then looked at Arlu. Arlu looked at him, then at Dex. Dex looked at Arlu. Rowan looked back at Dex so that their eyes met. She shot up. Who are you? Who is who? I'm nobody. We're nobody. Dex didn't budge. Who are you? I remember you. I'm afraid I'm not quite sure what you mean, miss. Perhaps we met somewhere before. Spent any time in the Sawjaw fight pits. Arlu shrugged and nodded her head side to side, indicating that he might as well tell her. Arlu, you're such a blabbermouth, grumbled Rowan. You're not just some slave. I'm just a slave. You're something else. Dex frantically scanned the area for anything that she could use as a weapon. She spotted her pig stick on the bench and reached for it, but Arlu snatched it up ahead of her. Behave yourself, Arlu. You're going to get us into trouble. It's all right. We're all friends here. Arlu scoffed and nodded at the gore pen. Dex could guess what she meant. Better to kill the girl now and feed her to the pigs. My name is Rowan Walker. I used to be the standard bearer of the Deltaic Legion, Vinian Knight, bodyguard and factotum to Lord Dweller, commander of the Junlin Mark. Dweller? You mean Father's trophy? Once again, Rowan and Arlu exchanged glances. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, I don't know much about it, but Trek and a golden knight saved my life when I was little. Now, he's Father's favorite trophy. Dex trailed off suspiciously. That was you, wasn't it? Arlu knew nothing about a little girl, and she crossed her arms, angry that once again, Rowan had failed to mention something rather important. Rowan, clearly accustomed to her ire, ignored her. Maybe we can help each other. I'm trying to locate Commander Dweller. I've been searching the swamps for years. You see, I can't go back to where I'm from until I find the commander, no matter his state. And anyway, this is all Crucian territory now. Oh, yeah, well, why can't you go back? I remember you. I didn't remember anything for a long time. Dex tried to pack an explanation of everything that had happened into a single angry sentence. Drager brought me here to be a war ghoul, but I found Trek, and he helped me remember what happened. And anyway, I remember on my own now. I remember you went across the river. I remember you left us. Yes, I can see it in your eyes. You're going to run again. That's not what happened, he pleaded with her. You're just a kid. Then he saw that Arlu was siding with the angry girl. She's just a kid. That's not what happened. The outpost was abandoned. Before I could even send a message, we were overrun by Sawjaws. Dex was unimpressed and plotting how she might take her pig stick from Arlu. A smug voice called out from the yard. It's feeding time, gremlin. Dex reluctantly broke the standoff, shaking her head at the pair. Shut it, Vago. I know. I'm sorry, miss. I've been through hell and worse trying to get free of the Sawjaws and to get word of Commander Dweller, whether he was dead or alive. I never meant. Dex pushed past Arlu and hurried out of the room, snarling. There's no way you're getting out of this rot pit, so it doesn't matter anyhow. Rowan cast a defeated gaze at Arlu. Arlu shrugged her shrug. Yeah, Maybe you're right. Arlu nodded. We should have stayed with the Sawjaws. In the midday heat, General Dragger pushed back his gore skull mask. He reined his horse to merge into the winding train of a Crussian Imperial convoy crossing the Hurin into Jodah. Soldiers, horses, wagons, and baggage had been arriving uninterrupted for weeks. The encampment spread up and down the riverbank, further than the eye could see. The din of different languages reached a dull, ubiquitous roar. There were probably 10,000 men-at-arms billeted already, with more pouring in by the hour, along with thousands of slaves and other pack animals. His war ghouls rode beside him, dressed in white uniforms. They were indistinguishable from the troops, massing in ever greater numbers along the river. On his right, two of the ghouls, Rez and Varn, had been living among the soldiers for months. By all accounts, they were wholly unremarkable men. They followed orders, showed courage when necessary, complained little, and did their assigned duties. The only difference between them and any other foot soldier was their upbringing. Rather than coming of age in a fetid city slum, or growing up uneducated under hard labor on a marginal farm, they were raised and trained to be ruthless killers, cunning spies, and zealously loyal to a singular master. On Dragger's left rode Gretch. She was his newest ghoul. She showed promise, eager and obedient. "Pay close attention," he told her. "You must move among the ranks like you belong here. Act deliberately, and few will question you. Yes, Father. Look and learn. Yes, Father. Tell me what you see." Gretch sat up in her saddle, shielding her eyes to scan the camp. Hundreds of archers rested in the shade with their recurved bows and bone-tip arrows. "Sunjata," she said, "woodsmen, hunters and sharpshooters. And there, Nazak, horsemen and magicians. And what do you hear? Many languages. I don't understand. Chatter and war chants. What do you smell? The smoke of 1,000 offerings burning on altars. Keen for his father's favor, Varn spoke over Gretch. The stink of sacrifices from 1,000 heathen tribes, plying their hollow gods and goddess by 1,000 ridiculous names. Dragger turned to his son and pointed towards the distant hill where gray tents stood apart. "And who are they?" "Grakans," Varn said with contempt, trying to impress his father with what he had learned from the whites. Nothing good comes from the north. Only giant roving bands of brutal barbarians that do nothing but rape and slaughter and be a terror to the Crussian Empire. Dragger smiled at Varn, but Varn did not feel any of the longed-for approval behind it. They passed through the outer gate of the hastily constructed fort, along with hundreds of others. They were met with fanfare and salutations, hurrahs and whores. The fort was a standardized rectangular design encompassing 3,000 acres. As the sun reached its peak, they rode up the central path to the army headquarters. It was a standardized structure comprised of earthen walls, thatched roofs, a central pool to catch rainwater and runoff, altars to the principal deities, rows of offices, a tribunal, and an underground vault for storing wages and bureaucratic records. All in all, it disgusted Dragger, even as he was hailed by all he met as Conqueror, Gore Slayer, and North Raider. He and his ghouls snaked their way through a colonnaded courtyard towards the conference hall. Inside, 8 Imperial lords and generals sat at a black table. White Imperial troopers stood guard on all sides. A slim young noble, Commander Tegat, speaks. "Until this army is fully prepared, we are vulnerable. The Jozen are too organized and battle-hardened. They're more dangerous than you realize." The grave General Joff twisted with vexation in his chair. "Dangerous to your private holdings along the charter, Tegat, not to this all-powerful host." Captain Cad spoke next, quick and loud. "The Jozen will continue to gain support along the border until—" "It's irrelevant," Baron Blaze cut in, ruthless as ever. "We have set aside our differences and forged an army greater than the world has ever seen. My fellow lords of the Crush, At last, the will of the cosmos is manifest. Our victory over the Joseon is assured. Ticket shot back. We may have all agreed, after 40 years, to dress our soldiers in white uniforms, but that doesn't mean we are prepared for a full-scale invasion. We wear white as a sign of our purity, lectured Captain Cad. We are unified now, with a singular vision, death to the Joseon. Blaze banged the table with approval. We'll divide their empire among ourselves. 2 are more than twice as strong, and we are infinite. Ticket, not to be shouted down, rejoined, very well indeed, but have caution. We are not yet one mind. In this immense gathering of so-called Crussians, there are 100 tribes clashing and cursing each other. Out there are rival chieftains that skinned each other's forefathers. Now they share cook fires, not because of any goodwill between them, but because we torture and enslave them to our bidding. Cad was already speaking before Ticket finished. By right of birth and imperial mandate, they have nothing except what we give them. They obey because obedience is all they have to offer us. Suddenly, all heads turned, and Captain Cad's speech was cut short. Baron Vorg de Cairn, handler of the Outland, entered. He was followed closely by his ally, a tall, dark man known by many titles and a singular reputation: the North Raider, Carvinian, Gore Slayer, General Dragger. All of the commanders stand and bow before the pair. Baron de Cairn, the eldest and highest ranking among them, took his place at the head of the table, but the Dark General loomed close behind. The Imperial Council will no longer be of any concern to us. I've just received word that Emperor Tobias has dissolved the council permanently. The old order has been abolished. That's impossible, blurted Ticket, after he recovered from the shock. The Empire will never survive it. The 1,000 kingdoms and city-states will be unmanageable without their handlers. The barons will have unquestioned authority over their domains. Even as we speak, General Joff's own division marches towards Darkin. That irksome province of flies and fevers will be cleared for settlement, and Governor Joff will get fat off of timber taxes and glance mining, with plenty of fresh young natives to work under him. So, have a little faith, dear Ticket. Faith in our infinite army, in the wisdom of our emperor. And what of the Joseon? What if they don't share our illusions? Illusions? Repeated Dragger. He stepped forward to menace the young commander, but was halted by the slightest of gestures from Cairn. Warned, but not silenced, Ticket chose his words more carefully. If they realize what we're planning, if they sense the slightest weakness or hesitation, they will push harder on our borders and spread dissent through the dawn. General Joff sneered. Any efforts made by the Joseon against this army would be wasted. Let them whisper and gossip, as the timid and feeble often do. Our conjoined forces are the most powerful host in the world. Dragger spoke softly behind his bony mask. Don't be so arrogant. This mob of slaves you've beaten into submission is nothing compared to the powers yet lurking in the darkness. Your loyalty to Damien Poth and his moldy texts won't spook the Vinian knights or drive the Joseon out of the valley. Only our soldiers can do that. No one is frightened by your fairy tales, Lord Dragger. Dragger didn't move or gesture, but with the lowest tone of his throat, he replied calmly, "The fearless die first." "Stop this," groaned Cairn. "This bickering is pointless. Lord Dragger has already made preparations for our push. We will have all the time we need to bring this army within striking distance of the Joseon. We will then crush them and their Vinian knights once and for all." Blaze was excited, but voiced concern. "What push? We haven't agreed on any attack." Young Tigat joined in. "I'm not going to risk my troops without knowing what I stand to gain." Cairn laced his fingers in his lap, drooping one leg over the other in a thoughtful posture. By and by, he glanced up at Dragger. The mass of dark robes advanced. Dragger calmly raised his helmet, only so that his thick, graying beard and stern, blackened lips were visible. He wore the skull mask as a kind of crown, and gore tusks like horns, balancing on his forehead. He spoke deliberately, not rehearsed, but honest. There's a difference between a warrior and a soldier. A warrior is someone who consecrates themselves to the holy art of war. A warrior has a cause of his, sacred, forgoing all compromise, which leads to violence. A soldier is a taskman. Sometimes that task is killing. Sometimes it's digging, marching, or foraging. But a soldier is paid in coin, merit, or release. But paid. A soldier may be brave, obedient, and competent, but they are loyal to the payment. A warrior is loyal to a cause for its own sake because they feel in their guts the rectitude of it. This drove of slaves is a chimera of causes. This endless, mindless mass of flesh you've stitched together may topple over walls with their body weight and fill the enemy moats with their corpses. They may trample pastures and drink up the streams with their slakeless throats, but they will never conquer anything. The drove will only ruin and abandon because it has no soul of its own. Only your short-sighted greed enthuses this abomination. And when your greed inevitably overreaches its grasp, the drove will dissolve with all your ambitions into nothing. The lords and generals were silent, speechless, and mostly offended. Baron Cairn slapped his knees with a jolly laugh. That was really unnecessary, my friend. I'm afraid it was entirely lost on most of them. And anyway, I wasn't asking for a big speech. I just wanted you to give the signal. Dragger stepped back with a modest bow, causing the gore mask to descend over his face. With that, all the white guards around the tent drew their weapons and slaughtered the lords and generals at the black table. After the savage attack, only 4 men remained calmly seated, even as spurts of arterial blood dappled their faces. Cairn lightly touched Dragger's shoulder. Go, ready yourself. Dragger nodded to the white guard beside him. Removing her helmet, Gretche's tawny hair curled around her shoulders. She smiled and blushed like she got her first kiss. She tossed the helmet on the table, where it clattered and upset the dishes. She skipped out, just ahead of Dragger, who took a last look at the carnage. Cairn dabbled at a stray drop of blood on his coat. God, why did we choose white? Whose idea was that anyway? Baron Blaze, General Joff, and Captain Cad, still alive, sat rigidly at the table. General Joff cleared his throat. I believe, my lord, that was the late Commander Tegat. Huh? Said Cairn, too busy scrubbing to recall what he'd asked. How many times have we done this, Blaze? I ask you, and what amazes me is that they never see it coming. Honestly, how do they keep getting promoted? Nobody bothered to answer him, as it seemed to be a rhetorical question. Now that this drove, began Blaze cautiously, is yours alone to command. What is your bidding? All will be revealed soon enough. Cairn raised an eyebrow at his fellow baron, as if daring him to ask again. Blaze demurred. Those guards, inquired Joff. They were draggers, agents. Oh yes, he has the most remarkable way with people, wouldn't you say? Ha ha, fancies himself a priest of some kind. He's dangerous. Cairn dropped his hands in frustration. Well, this stain isn't coming out, I swear.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.